Welcome to today's blog, where we're going to talk about what a word means and is the medium of a message. Particularly, we're going to talk about McLuhan's quotes, specifically the quote, "It is the framework which changes with each new technology and not just the picture within the frame." I think this is really relevant when you're really talking about words, and I think this is really important when you're talking about which medium is being used to portray a message. It's something that affects the meaning of a message and how it's interpreted. Language, the medium, any sort of way that a message is portrayed. If it's a picture, it might affect you differently than if you did it the same message, say, in film. Having it in motion versus having it stand still, or having a message spoken versus having to read it. Not only that, but the language it is being spoken in, or written in, or created in, is something that we know affects how somebody thinks. Language in itself, a medium itself, is a framework. It molds how we perceive. If you would say an example, a language. If a language, say, doesn't have any past, future text, and it's only present, then it might make it hard to describe what happened yesterday. Or it might change the meaning of a message that relates to what happened yesterday. It might change the way the person who's using that language perceives past events or future events. There might be a language out there that doesn't use the words left, right, front, back, but they might only use the words, or their versions of the words, of north, south, west, or east. That could change the way you give direction to people. To say, it is relevant to say that the framework would change with each new technology, as a new technology would mean a different medium would be used. For an example, before TVs were invented, news wasn't given on your daily news at 6 o'clock. It was given in the morning, reading it with your breakfast in a newspaper that was delivered by a local kid. The framework in which we think things now, like using that paper, reading that paper, would change the way you think about your daily news, about how you get it, your access to different information that's happening. In the day and age where newspaper was the most common form of written media, you might not hear about international news, thus you might not think about what's happening in Japan if you live in Canada. You might not know about it because it hasn't been reported to you. But with the invention of the internet, with the invention of television, we now have access to news that's broadcast all around the world from everywhere. So somebody might reading their news on their computer or watching it at 6 o'clock at night might hear about what's going on in South America when they live in North America. It might actually matter about to them. It could change the way they think about things. Yeah, I think with new technology, it would change the framework of a message, or how we think about things, not just what happens within that framework, because the frame itself has changed because of the technology. As today we have VR, that in itself could possibly down the line change how we receive information. Now I'm going to be able to go to places without actually going there. It could change on how I receive things, how I understand things. That's the importance of medium. And technology is a medium for messages. It's a medium for information. It doesn't matter what kind of technology it is, because it'll change the way we think. An example of this would be like medical technology. You might not think that might change the way we perceive messages, how we think, but it does, simply because there's more of us around nowadays. If we aren't worrying about the exact same things anymore. So what would be important to us 150 years ago, because we lack the medical technology, wouldn't be important to us today. So it's not being taught, so that changes how we think about things. Nobody's worrying about dying of the Black Plague today. So of course nobody's worrying about talking to their next door neighbor because they might have the plague and they might die. It just means it because it changed how we think. Technology is a medium. It changes how we perceive the world around us and how we perceive the messages we receive and what those messages are. So we wouldn't just be changing what we understand, what we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're looking at, but we're also changing how we perceive that message, how we understand that message. So I think McLuhan's quote is very accurate, that it's not just the framework which changes with each new technology, and not just the picture within the frame. They both change. You can't change one without the other. You can't change the framework of how we understand things, how we perceive messages, without changing the picture inside of it, or vice versa. It shouldn't surprise anybody that if we change the technology, we change the medium in which you're sending out or receiving a message, that the framework would change and not just the message.